Chapter 16 of Book 4 of Metaphysics by Aristotle, translated by John McMahon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 16. Perfect is denominated that beyond which it is not possible to assume anything or any one single portion, as for instance, the time of each thing is perfect, beyond which it is not possible to assume any period of duration which is a portion of this time, and that which, according to virtue, and to what belongs to the excellent, doth not involve excess with respect to any genus, as for instance a perfect or finished physician, and a perfect or finished musician, are such when they are in no wise deficient as far as regards the species of the excellence that is proper to their professions. So also, transferring our remarks to the case of evil things, we say a perfect or finished sycophant, and a finished thief, since we also denominate these characters good, as a good thief, and a good sycophant. And virtue is a certain perfection, for each thing is then perfect, and every substance is then perfect, when, in accordance with the species of its proper excellence or virtue, no portion of the natural magnitude is deficient. Further, in whatever things resides an admirable end, these are styled perfect, for in respect of involving an end are they perfect. Wherefore, since the end is something belonging to extremes, and transferring also our remarks to the case of things that are worthless, we say that a thing is perfectly lost and perfectly corrupted when not of the corruption and of what is bad is deficient, but when it has arrived at the ultimate limit of these. Wherefore also death metaphorically is called the termination, because both are extremes. The end, however, together with the final cause, is a thing that is ultimate. The things indeed, therefore, denominated essentially perfect, are styled in thus much number of ways, partly in their being no wise deficient according to subsisting in an excellent manner, nor involving excess in each genus, nor there being anything extrinsic belonging to them, and the other things now are termed essentially perfect in respect either of the doing some such thing, or the having it in possession, or of the adaptation of itself to this, or in accordance at least with some other mode of expression in relation to things that are primarily called perfect. Chapter 17. A termination is called the last of each thing, and beyond which, as first, it is not possible to assume anything, and within which, as first, are comprised all things, and that likewise which may be a form of magnitude, or of that which is in possession of magnitude, and which is the end of everything. Now, a thing of this kind is that towards which motion and the mode of an action tend, and not from which they originate. Sometimes, however, a termination is both of these, both that from which motion and action originate, and towards which they tend. Also, that for the sake of which other things operate, and the substance of each thing, and the essence or the formal cause of each. For this is a termination of knowledge, and if of knowledge, also of the thing done. Wherefore it is evident that even as often as the first principle is predicated, so often also is the termination, and still more multifariously. For the first principle, to be sure, is a certain termination. Not every termination, however, is a first principle. Chapter 18. The according to which, is denominated in many ways. In one way, indeed, as the species and the substance of each thing, as, for instance, that in accordance with which a man is good, itself is good, and in another way, as that in which first a thing has been fitted by nature to rise into being, as colour in a superficies. Therefore, what has indeed in the first instance been mentioned as the according to which constitutes form, but that mentioned secondarily as such is as the matter of each thing, and the first subject in everything. And in general, the according to which will have a subsistence as often as the cause, for according to what a man has come is an expression of the same import as on account of what he has come, and the inquiry according to what false reasoning or correct reasoning may be drawn is the same as an inquiry into what is the cause of the syllogism or the paralogism in such cases. Moreover, the according to which is denominated that which subsists according to a position according to which one stands, or according to which one walks, for all these signify position and locality. Wherefore, that according to itself or the essential is necessarily expressed in many ways. For in one way is that according to itself or the essential the very nature of each thing, or the formal cause, as, for example, Callias essentially is the very nature also of Callias, and secondly, it signifies whatsoever things are inherent in the what anything is, as Callias essentially is an animal. For in the definition of Callias is to be found animal, for Callias is a certain description of animal. And thirdly, may we denominate that according to itself or the essential as a thing that has primarily been a recipient in itself, or a certain part of things that belong to itself, as for instance, superficies is essentially white, and man essentially is an animal, for the soul is a certain portion of the man in which vitality is primarily inherent. Fourthly, does it signify that of which there is not any other cause, for of man there are many causes, such as animal, biped, but nevertheless man is man essentially. Fifthly, we consider that according to itself or the essential as many things as are inherent in some one particular thing alone, and as far forth as it is alone, wherefore whatever has a separate has also an essential subsistence. Chapter 19. Disposition is styled an arrangement of that which has parts either according to place or to potentiality, or according to species, for it is necessary that there be a certain position, as also the name disposition makes manifest. Chapter 20. Now habit is denominated in one way as a certain energy of the possessor and the possessed, just as it were a certain action or motion. For when the one accomplishes and the other is accomplished, the act of accomplishing is a mean between them. So also between one having in possession a garment and the garment had in possession, habit is a mean. Therefore indeed is it evident that it is not admissible that this should involve another habit. For the thing would go on to infinity if it be the case that one habit should involve the habit of that which is possessed. And in another way is habit styled a disposition according to which that which is disposed well or ill, and this either according to itself, that is, essentially, or in relation to another, as, for example, health is a certain habit, for it is a disposition of this sort. Further is a thing called habit in a case where it may be a portion of such a disposition. Wherefore also is the virtue or excellency of the parts a certain habit. Chapter 21. Passion is denominated in one way, quality according to which a thing admits of alteration, as white and black, and sweet and bitter, and gravity and lightness, and whatsoever other such things there are. And in another way now are energies and alterations called passions of these. Still more than these are noxious alterations and motions, passions, and particularly those motions that along with being noxious or injurious are painful likewise. Further, the crushing burdens of misfortunes, and of things that are fraught with suffering, are called passions. Chapter 22. Privation is denominated in one way in case a thing does not involve any of the things that by nature are adapted for being possessed, even though itself may not by nature be adapted for the possession of such, as, for example, a plant in this sense is said to be deprived of eyes. And in another way is that termed privation if a thing be by nature fit for possession of a thing, either itself or the genus, and yet may not have possession of that thing, as in one sense is a blind man deprived of sight, and a mole in another, the latter indeed according to the genus, and the former according to itself or essentially. Further is that privation if a thing be by nature adapted to possess a quality, and when it is so adapted by nature to possess it, yet possesses it not. For blindness is a certain privation, but for an animal to be blind is not in accordance with every age, but with that only in which it is fitted by nature to have sight, and yet may not have it at all. And in like manner may privation be found in the what, and according to what, and for what, and so far forth as it may be adapted by nature for the possession of such, and yet may not possess them. Further, the violent removal of each thing is styled a privation, and as often also as are expressed negations from A, so often likewise are expressed privations. For the unequal is denominated thus from the fact of the non-possession of equality when by nature it is fitted for it, but the invisible both from being entirely without colour and in consequence of having it defectively. And an animal is called apos, or without feet, both from its being without feet entirely, and in consequence of having them attended with some defect. Further, do we call a thing privation when that thing has anything small, as, for instance, any fruit with a small kernel, and this amounts to the being in a manner disposed defectively. And again, we say privation exists where a thing cannot be effected with facility, or in a proper manner, as, for example, that which cannot be severed is so not only in respect of the incapacity of being severed, but also in respect of the incapacity of being severed easily or properly. Moreover, privation is found in the non-possession of a thing in every way. For a person blind is not called such from being one-eyed, but from being deprived of the power of vision in both eyes. Wherefore, not every man is good or evil, or just or unjust, but also there are shades of character intermediate between these. Chapter 23. Possession is denominated in many ways. In one way as the action of a thing according to the nature of that thing, or according to the impulse of it. Wherefore, both a fever is said to possess a man, and tyrants are said to possess states, and those that are clothed a garment. And in another way, we term possession as that in whatever anything is inherent, as being receptive, as, for instance, the brass possesses the form of a statue, and the body possesses disease. And in another way, we term possession as a thing that embraces the things that are comprised, for wherein anything is comprised, by this it is said to be possessed. As, for instance, we say that the vessel possesses moisture, and the city inhabitants, and the ship sailors, and so also the whole possesses the parts. And further, that which hinders, in accordance with its own force, anything from motion or action, is said to possess this very thing, as, for example, both the pillars possess the superincumbent weights, and just as the poets make Atlas to possess the heaven, so that it should otherwise fall upon the earth, as also certain of the physiologists affirm. And in this way, likewise, is the connecting said to possess the things which it connects, as if they would otherwise have severally been separated according to their own proper force. And the being in anything is expressed in a similar manner with, and as a consequence upon, possession. Chapter 24. The being from anything is said in one way to be that from which a thing is, as from matter, and this in a twofold respect, either according to the first genus, or according to the last species, as, for instance, all liquids, in a way, are from water, and the statue is from brass, and in another way we consider the being from anything as that which springs from the first moving cause. Thus, from what doth the battle arise? From invective, because such is a first principle of the battle. In another sense, however, is this defined as that from what is composite, I mean from matter and form, as the parts from the whole, and the verse from the Iliad, and the stones from the house. For form is an end to be sure, but that which possesses an end is finished. And in some respects it is as the species from a part. For instance, man is from biped, and a syllable from a letter, for these are from those otherwise than the statue from the brass. For from the matter cognizant to the senses is the composite substance, but also form consists from the matter of the form. Some things are styled in this way, as that from anything, and others if they subsist according to any part of these modes, as from the father and mother the child, and from earth the plants, because they spring from some part of them. And lastly is this styled as that which subsists after anything in time, as night is said to be from day, and a storm from a calm, because the one follows after the other. But of these some are so called in respect of possessing the power of mutual change, as also those particulars just now enumerated, but others only in respect of their being successive in time, as from the equinox is made a voyage, because it is made after the equinox, and the Thargelia are from the Dionysia, because they are celebrated after the Dionysia. Chapter 25. A part is said to be in one way that into which any quantity whatsoever may be divisible, for always that which is subtracted from quantity, so far forth as it is quantity, is called a portion of that thing. Thus of three is the two in a manner called a part, and in another way that which measures it is called the part of things of this sort merely. Wherefore two in one way is a part of three, as is stated, and in another is not so. Moreover, those things into which the species of animal may be divided, without quantity, these also are called parts of this species. Wherefore they say that species are parts of the genus. We further call those things parts into whatsoever anything is divided, or those things whereof the whole is made up, or the species, or that which involves the species, even as the brass is a part of the brazen sphere, or of the brazen cube, but this is the matter wherein the form resides, and an angle also is a part. Moreover, those things that are contained in the definition which manifests each thing, these also are parts of the whole. Wherefore the genus is called a part also of the species, and in other respects the species is regarded a part of the genus. Chapter 26. A whole is styled, first, that from which is absent no part of those things whereof the whole by nature is said to consist, and secondly, that which contains the things contained, so that they form one certain thing. And this is the case in a twofold way, for it is so either in such a manner that each may be one, or that one thing may arise from these. For the universal indeed, and that which is predicated in general as being a certain whole, are universal in such a way as that the predication of each contains many things, and that all are one, as each predicated thing is. For example, man, horse, God is individually one thing, because all are animals. And the continuous and the finite may we regard as a whole when there may be produced one thing from many things that are inherent, especially when this is the case in potentiality, but if not in energy. Now, of these very things, rather are those wholes which subsist by nature than such as are made by art, as also we say in regard of the one, that entirety is a certain unity. Further, seeing that quantity has a first principle, and a mean, and an extreme, of whatsoever quantity's position does not cause a difference, all is predicated, but of whatsoever it does, a whole is predicated. And as many things as admit of both whole and all are predicated. There are those things, however, whose nature abides the same in the act of transposition, but not so with the form, as wax and a garment. For both whole and all are they styled, for they possess both. But water, and whatsoever things are moist, and number are called all, no doubt. Yet number is not styled a whole, and water a whole, unless metaphorically. All those, however, are predicated thus, of which the entire is predicated, as in the case of the one. In the case of these, I say all things are predicated, as in the case of things divided, we say all this is number, and all these monads. Chapter 27. But the mutilated is styled, amongst quantities, not every indiscriminate quantity, but it must needs be itself divisible and a whole. For two things are not mutilated when either one is being subtracted. For both the mutilation and what remains nowhere are equal, nor in general is any number mutilated, for also must its substance needs remain. Thus, if a goblet be mutilated, still must the goblet exist. But a number is no longer the same when a part is taken away. And in addition to these, if also things may be of dissimilar parts, neither can all these be considered mutilated. For number is that which also contains dissimilar parts, as for example a duad, a triad. But in short, none of those things of which the position does not make a difference is mutilated, as water or fire, but such must needs be mutilated which have a substantial position. Further, things continuous must needs be mutilated, for harmony consisting from things of dissimilar parts, indeed, also possesses position, but it does not become mutilated. And in addition to these, neither are those things mutilated, whatsoever are wholes, by the privation of any part whatsoever indifferently. For it is not necessary that either the principal parts of the substance, or those that are taken away anywhere whatsoever, should make what remains mutilated. As, for instance, if a goblet be bored, it is not mutilated, but if its handle, or if any of its extremities be, it is mutilated. And a man is not mutilated if he have flesh or spleen, but if he have an extremity taken away, and not every such indifferently, but should it be that which does not possess the power of reproduction when entirely taken away. Wherefore, bald persons are not mutilated. Chapter 28. Genus is styled so partly when there may be a continuous generation of things that possess the same species, as for instance there is said to be a genus of men, because as long as the generation of them may be continuous, there would exist such. And it is that also from which things derive their being, as the first disposing cause towards existence. For so are the Hellenes styled the genus, and the Ionians, the former as springing from Helen, and the latter from Ion, as the first generator. And rather are those things a genus that are from the generator than from the matter, for they are said to be the genus also that are from the female, as those from Pyrrha. Further are they termed as the surface is called the genus of superficial figures, and the solid of such as are solid. For as regards each of the figures, the one is such a surface, but the other is such a solid, and this is the subject in the differences, which of course is the genus. Further, do we regard genus as that which first is inherent in definitions, which is predicated in the case of the essence of a thing, the differences of which are called qualities. The genus, therefore, indeed is denominated in thus many ways, partly according to the continuous generation of the same species, and partly according to the original moving power of the same species, and partly as matter, for that to which the difference and the quality belong, this constitutes the subject which we style matter. And things are called diverse in genus of which the first subject is diverse, and in the case of which one is not resolved into another, nor both into the same, as the form and the matter are something different in the genus, and whatsoever things are denominated according to a different form of the predication of entity. For some entities signify quiddity, and some a certain quality of a thing, and some have a signification in accordance with our former division, for neither are these resolvable either into one another or into any one thing. Chapter 29. The false is denominated in one way as a false thing, and in regard of this, partly in the fact of its not being composed, or in the impossibility of its being in a state of composition, as the expression of the diameter being commensurable, or of your being in a sitting posture. For of these the former is indeed always, but the latter sometimes false, for thus are these not in being. For things are false as many as are in being, no doubt, but yet are fitted by nature to appear either not such as they are, or what they are not, as, for example, a rough painting and dreams. For these truly are something, but not those things of which they cause an imagination or impression. Things indeed, therefore, are thus termed false, either in respect of themselves not being, or in respect of the impression that is conveyed from them being that of a nonentity, and a false discourse is a discourse about nonentities, so far forth as it is false. Wherefore, every false definition or discourse is employed about something that is different from that of which it would be a true discourse, as the discourse about a circle is a false one when transferred to a triangle. Now, the discourse or definition of everything is partly as one, namely, that explanatory of the essence, and it is partly as many, since somehow a thing itself, and this thing, viewed as passive, may be regarded the same as Socrates, and Socrates the musical. And a false discourse is a discourse simply about nothing. Wherefore Antisthenes entertained a silly opinion when he thought that nothing could be predicated, unless one, in regard of one thing, by a proper definition or discourse. The result of which statements was, that there can be no contradiction in existence, and almost no way of making a false assertion. It is possible, however, to express each thing not only in a discourse proper to itself, but also in that which belongs to a different thing, falsely no doubt, and altogether so. Notwithstanding, then, is it possible to express the same in a manner also with truth, as for instance 8 are twofold from the definition of the duad. Some things indeed, therefore, are denominated in this way false. But a false man is called one who is ready and disposed to admit false assertions of such a sort, not on account of anything that is different, but on account of their being false, and who, in the case of others, is the cause of the adoption of such false assertions, as also we say that those things are false as many as create a false impression. Wherefore the reasoning in the Hippias of Plato is sophistical, so far as it endeavours to establish that the same man is false and true. For one that is capable of deceiving he receives as false, and this person is one that is knowing and prudent. Further, a man who is voluntarily worthless he pronounced a better man. Now, this falsehood he gathers by induction, for one that is lame voluntarily is superior to one that is so involuntarily, considering the voluntary lameness as an imitation of lameness. Since, if were he lame voluntarily, he would, perhaps, be a worse individual, as this also would be the case as regards moral deportment. Chapter 30. An accident, however, is denominated as that which is inherent in something, and which it is true to affirm is so, yet not either necessarily or for the most part, as, for example, if any one in digging a furrow for a plant should discover a treasure. This, then, would be an accident to the person engaged in digging the trench, namely, the discovery of the treasure, for neither does the one necessarily follow from the other, nor after it, nor, should one be occupied in planting, does he, for the most part, find a treasure. And the case is the same should any one who is musical be white, since, however, this takes place neither of necessity, nor as, for the most part, we pronounce this an accident. Wherefore, since there is something which has a subsistence, and a subsistence in something, and some of these both in a certain place and at a certain time, whatsoever would be so indeed, but would involve no illusion as to why it was this particular thing, either now or here, such will be an accident. Nor, doubtless, is there any definite cause of what is accidental, but the cause of this is the casual or ordinary, and this is the indefinite. Thus it has been accidental to a certain individual his arriving at Aegina, if he has not left home for this purpose, that he should go thither, but has been driven there by a storm, or captured by pirates. The accidental, doubtless, has been generated, and will have a subsistence, not, however, so far forth as itself is concerned, but as far as something else is. For the storm was the cause of his going to the port he was not sailing for, and this was Aegina. And in another way is a thing called an accident, for example, in the way whatsoever things are inherent in each thing essentially, and yet are not contained in the substance of that thing, as in a triangle to have angles equal to two right angles. And accidents of this sort it is admissible should be eternal, yet this is not the case with any of those others. The reason, however, of this may be found elsewhere. End of chapter 30 and end of book 4. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 1 of Book 5 of Metaphysics by Aristotle, translated by John McMahon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 1. The first principles and causes of entities are under investigation, and it is evident that the investigation regards the causes and first principles of entities so far forth as they are entities. For there is a certain cause of health, and of a good habit of body, and of mathematical entities. Likewise are there first principles, and elements, and causes, and in general also every science which is an intellectual one, or in any degree even partaking of the faculty of thought, is conversant about causes and first principles, which are either more accurate or more simple as the case may be. All of these, however, being descriptive of one particular subject and a particular genus, are engaged about this, but not concerning being or entity simply considered, nor so far forth as it is entity, nor do they make any account of the substance of a thing, but from this one particular subject, partly from sense making this manifest, and partly assuming an hypothesis as to substance or quiddity, they accordingly demonstrate the things that are essentially inherent in the genus about which they subsist, either more necessarily or more feebly. Wherefore it is evident that there is not a demonstration of substance, nor of the what a thing is, that is, of quiddity, by means of an induction of such a kind. But there is some other mode of manifestation. In like manner also, these sciences say nothing as to whether the genus about which they are engaged is or is not, on account of its belonging to the same faculty of thought, or understanding, and of its making manifest the nature of a thing, and whether it is this particular thing. But since also physical science happens to be conversant about a certain genus of entity, for about such a sort of substance is it conversant in which is contained in itself the first principle of motion and of rest, it is evident that it is neither practical nor productive, that is, effective, for the first principle of things that are productive resides in the producer or efficient cause, whether that principle be mind, or art, or a certain capacity. But the first principle of things that are practical is free will in the agent. For the same thing is an object of action and of free will. Wherefore, if every dianoetic faculty be either practical, or productive, or speculative, the physical dianoetic energy would be some speculative science. But speculative about such an entity as it is possible should have motion imparted to it, and about such a substance as existing according to reason, for the most part has not a separable subsistence merely. It is requisite, however, as regards the essence or formal cause, and the definition how things are so, that this should not escape our notice, as without this knowledge at least, the present investigation would be the accomplishing of nothing. But of things that are defined, and to which the inquiry what they are belongs, some subsist in such a manner as the flat nose, and some as the hollow, and these differ, since flat nose is conceived along with matter, for in truth a flat nose is a hollow nose, but hollowness or concavity is without sensible matter. If, therefore, all physical or natural things are predicated in the same way as flat nose, as for instance, nose, eye, face, flesh, bone, in short, animal, leaf, root, bark, in short, plant, for the definition of none of these subsists without motion, but such invariably involves matter, it is plain how it is necessary in physical inquiries to investigate the nature of a thing, and to define it, and why also it is the part of the natural philosopher to institute an inquiry concerning a certain soul, namely, such a soul as is not unconnected with matter. That therefore the physical dianoetic energy is speculative is evident from these statements. But also the mathematical dianoetic energy is speculative also. Whether it is conversant, however, about entities that are immovable and capable of a separate subsistence, is a point that at present is obscure. But that certain mathematical systems investigate certain entities, so far as they are immovable, and so far as they have a separable subsistence, is clear. Now, if there is something that is eternal and immovable, and that involves a separate subsistence, it is evident that it is the province of the speculative, that is, of the ontological science to investigate such. It is not certainly the province of physical science, at any rate. For physical science is conversant about certain movable natures, nor of the mathematical, but of a science prior to both of these, that is, the science of metaphysics. For physical science, I admit, is conversant about things that are inseparable, to be sure, but not immovable. And of mathematical science, some are conversant about entities that are immovable, it is true, yet perhaps not separable, but subsisting as in matter. But metaphysics, or the first philosophy, is conversant about entities which both have a separate subsistence and are immovable. And it is necessary that causes should be eternal, all without exception, but particularly these, for these are the causes of the things that are manifest or phenomenal amongst those that are divine. Wherefore, according to this view of things, there would be three speculative philosophies, namely the mathematical, the physical, the theological. For it is not obscure that if what is divine exists anywhere, it resides in such a nature as this, and it is requisite that that should be the most honourable science, which is conversant about a genus of things which is most entitled to our respect. The speculative sciences, accordingly, are more eligible than the rest of the sciences, and of such as are speculative, this science of metaphysics, now under investigation, is more eligible than all the others. For one would feel a doubt as to whether at all the first philosophy, or ontology, is universal or conversant about a certain genus, and one nature. For neither is there the same method of conducting our inquiries in the mathematical sciences. But geometry, in fact, and astronomy are conversant about a certain peculiar nature. Yet, in reply to this, I would say that pure mathematics universally is common to all the branches of that science, and thus that the first philosophy universally is common to all the sciences. If, then, there is not some different substance besides those that consist by nature, the physical would be the first science. But if there is a certain immovable substance, this will be prior, and the subject of the first philosophy, and in this way will subsist universally, because it is the first of the sciences, and it would be the province of this science of metaphysics, or ontology, to institute an inquiry respecting entity, so far forth as it is entity, and respecting quiddity, or the nature of a thing, and respecting those things that universally are inherent in it, so far forth as it is entity. Chapter 2. Since, however, entity, simply so called, is denominated in many ways, of which one was that which subsists according to accident, and another that which is as a thing that is true, and the non-being of which is as a thing that is false, and besides these, since these are figures of predication, as for example quiddity, and quality, and quantity, and the place where, and the time when, and whatever else there is that is significant in this way. Further, besides all these, is there that which subsists in potentiality, and that which subsists in energy. Since, however, I say entity is denominated in many ways, in the first instance, as far as regards that subsisting according to accident, must we declare that respecting this there exists no speculation. And a proof of this statement is the following. For in no science is there any attention paid to this, neither in practical, nor productive, nor speculative science. For neither does one who builds a house make at the same time as many things as are accidental to the house, when it is built, for these are infinite. There is no hindrance, for example, but that the house, when it has been constructed, should prove to some persons agreeable, but to others injurious, and to others serviceable, and, as I may say, different from all entities, of none of which the building art is productive. And in the same manner, neither does the geometrician speculate into things which in this way are accidental to figures, nor whether there is any difference between a wooden triangle and a triangle having angles equal to 2 right angles. And this coincidence takes place rationally, for the accidental subsists as it were in name merely. Wherefore, after a certain mode, Plato judiciously arranged nonentity about the art of the sophist. For the arguments of the sophists are employed about the accident, as I may say, most especially of all things. For they ask, for instance, whether a musician and a grammarian are a different person or the same, and whether the musical choriscus and choriscus are the same, and whether everything which may exist, yet not always, has been generated. Wherefore, whether in case a man is musical he has been made grammatical, and whether in case he is grammatical he has been made musical, and as many other arguments, no doubt, as there are of this kind. For accident appears to be a something that hovers on the confines of nonentity. Now, this is evident also from such arguments as the foregoing. For of those things that subsist in a different way from accidents, there is generation and corruption, but this is not the case with those things that subsist according to accident. Nevertheless, however, must we further discuss concerning accident, as far as is possible, what is its nature, and on account of what cause it exists. For at the same time, perhaps, will it be evident on account of what reason also there is not a science of it. Since, therefore, there are in entities some things that are always disposed in a similar manner, and from necessity, a necessity that is not denominated according to what is violent, but that which we have spoken of in the case of its not being admissible for a thing to be otherwise than it is, and since other things, though these are not of necessity to be sure, nor always, yet are in existence for the most part, this is the first principle, and this the cause of the subsistence of accident. For whatever may be neither always, nor for the most part, this we pronounce to be an accident, as for instance in the dog days, that is, when the sun is in Canis, if there should prevail storm and cold, we say that this is accidental. We should not, however, speak in this manner, should stifling heat and warmth be generated, because the latter invariably, or at least for the most part, is prevalent at such a season of the year, whereas the former is not. And that a man is white is an accident, for neither is he always so, nor for the most part, but that man is an animal is not according to accident. And for a builder to have been instrumental in producing good health is an accident, because a builder is not fitted by nature to accomplish this, but a physician is. But it would be an accident for the builder his being a physician, and a cook aiming at furnishing pleasure would probably make something calculated to promote health, but not in accordance with or by virtue of the art of cooking. Wherefore we say that this would be accidental, and that in a certain respect the cook makes something that is salubrious, but simply considered that he does not so. For of some things are there other potentialities that sometimes are productive, but of others there is no definite art or potentiality. For of those things that are, or are generated according to accident, the cause also is according to accident. Wherefore, since all things are not from necessity, and always either are entities or are in generation, but since most things have a subsistence for the most part, it is necessary that there be in existence something which subsists according to accident, and that it should be such as is a white musician, who exists neither always, nor for the most part. Since sometimes, however, such is produced, there will be a subsistence according to accident, and if not, all things will subsist from necessity. Wherefore, matter will be the contingent cause of what is accidental differently from that which has a subsistence for the most part. We must, however, assume this as a beginning of the inquiry, whether there is nothing which subsists neither always nor for the most part, or whether this is impossible. Accordingly, in addition to these things, is there something which in one way or other has a casual subsistence, and a subsistence according to accident? Shall we, however, admit that that which has a subsistence for the most part, and that which has a perpetual subsistence, is not inherent in the nature of anything, or are there certain entities that are eternal? Concerning these points, indeed, we will afterwards examine. That, however, there is not a science of the accidental is manifest. For, certainly, every science is a science either of that which subsists always, or of that which subsists as for the most part. For otherwise, how should one learn anything, or instruct another? For it is necessary that the object of the science be defined either by that subsisting always, or that having a subsistence for the most part, as that meat is useful for the most part for one that is sick of fever. What, however, is beyond this it will not be allowable to affirm, namely, as to the time when it may not be useful, as for instance during new moon, for either always, or for the most part, is the mead serviceable during new moon, also, and what is different from these is accidental. What in truth, therefore, the accidental is, and from what cause it arises, and that there is no science of it in existence, has been declared. Chapter 3. Now, that there are first principles and causes that are generable and corruptible without anything rising into existence and falling into decay is evident. For if this were not the case, all things would subsist from necessity. If of that which is being produced and corrupted, there must needs be a certain cause which does not subsist according to accident. For whether will this particular thing take place or not? If, at least, this be produced, it will, but if not, by no means will it take place, but this latter will take place if something else is accomplished. And so it is manifest that when time is subtracted from finite duration, you will invariably come to the present moment. Wherefore, this person will die either by disease or violence if he, at least, go forth out of the city, and this will take place if he should be thirsty, and this will happen if something else happens, and so will he come to that which now is, or to something of those things that have been. As, for instance, if he may have felt thirst, and this will happen if he eats things that are pungent to the taste, and this assuredly is the case or is not, wherefore he shall necessarily either die or shall not die. In like manner also, if any one pass over in his inquiry to the things that have been done, the reasoning is the same, for already does this subsist in something, but I speak of that which has been done. Accordingly, all things that are likely to be in future will subsist from necessity, as, for instance, the death of one that is living, for already has something been accomplished which shows a tendency towards dissolution, I mean the existence of things that are contrary in the same body. But if the death of this person is to be brought about by disease or violence, not as yet has this taken place, but should this particular thing be effected. It is evident, then, that this reduction advances towards a certain principle, and this principle no longer extends to anything else. Therefore will this be the principle of what is casual, and there will be nothing as a cause of its generation. But into what sort of first principle, and what sort of cause such a reduction may be made, whether as into matter, or as into the final cause, or as into the power that imparts motion, that is the efficient cause, is particularly worthy of consideration. Chapter 4. Therefore, indeed, respecting the entity which subsists according to accident, let the discussion be dismissed, for the subject has been determined with sufficient accuracy. Now, that which subsists as true is entity, and that which subsists as false is nonentity, since they are employed about composition and division, and entirety about a portion of contradiction. For that which is true involves an affirmation in the case of composition, and a negation in the case of division, but that which is false involves the contradiction of this division. But how it is possible to understand what subsists at the same time, or has a separate subsistence, this is another question. Now, I mean that things which subsist together, and that which subsists apart, are disposed in such a way as not to subsist in a consequent order, but so as to become one certain thing. For not in things themselves are the false and the true, as that which is good is true, but that which is bad is false, but in the understanding, and the truth and falsehood concerning things that are simple, and concerning essence, are not in the understanding either. As many points, then, as it is requisite to examine into as regards entity subsisting in this way, and regarding nonentity, must be investigated on a subsequent occasion. Since, however, composition and division are in the intellect, but not in the things themselves, and that which is an entity after this manner is different from those things that are properly termed entities. For either the nature of a thing, or its being of a certain quality or quantity, or something else of the kind, doth the intellect conjoin or separate. That which, as an entity, subsists as an accident, and that which is as it were what is true, the consideration of these must be omitted. For the cause of the one is indefinite, but of the other a certain affection of the understanding. And both are conversant about the remaining genus of entity, and do not render manifest any nature that is of an higher order than entity. Wherefore, let these points be omitted, to be sure, but we must examine the causes and the first principles of entity itself, so far forth as it is entity. And it is evident in what we have laid down concerning the multifarious predication of everything, that entity is denominated in many ways. End of chapter 4 and end of book 5. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 1 of Book 6 of Metaphysics by Aristotle, translated by John McMahon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 1. Entity is denominated in many ways, as we have previously made the division in the case of those statements relating to its multifarious predications. For one signification of entity is, the what a thing is, or quiddity, and this certain particular thing, and another is quality, or quantity, or each of the rest of the things that are so predicated. Now, seeing that entity is spoken of in thus many ways, it is evident that the first entity amongst these is quiddity, or the what a thing is, which signifies substance. For when we say that this particular thing is of a certain quality, we term it either good or bad, but not as of 3 cubits, or that it is a man. When, however, we say what a thing is, we term it not white, or warm, or of 3 cubits, but a man, or a god. But the other entities are denominated so in regard of belonging to entity that is really such, some, to wit, as being quantities, and some qualities, and some passions, and others some other things of the sort. Wherefore one might feel perplexed as to whether walking, and health, and sitting, were each of them an entity or a nonentity. And in like manner also is it the case with any whatsoever of the other things of this kind, respecting which similar doubts are entertained. For none of them is adapted by nature either to subsist essentially, or is capable of being separated from substance, but rather, if I may express myself so, this is to be said of any amongst the entities which is walking, and sitting, and being in sound health. And these rather than those appear to be entities, because they have some definite subject, and this is substance, and the singular, which appears in the category of this kind. For that which is good, or the sitting posture, is not expressed without this also. It is evident, therefore, that each of those also subsists on account of this. Wherefore, that which is primarily entity, and not any particular entity, but entity simply, or absolutely, will constitute substance. Therefore, that which is first is denominated in many ways. Nevertheless, first of all is substance, both in reason and knowledge, and time and nature. For no one of the rest of the categories is capable of a separate subsistence, but this alone. And in definition is this first, for in the definition of everything there is a necessity that the definition of substance be inherent. and then we think we know each particular thing, especially when we know what man is, or fire is, rather than when we know the quality, or the quantity, or the situation of a thing, since we then come to know each of these things when we know what the quantity of them is, or the quality. And unquestionably also was that originally, and at the present time, and always a subject of investigation, and invariably of doubt, namely, what entity is, that is, what substance is, for some say that this is one, but others that it is more than one, and some maintain that things which are finite are this entity, but others things that are infinite. Wherefore also, especially, and primarily, and exclusively, as I may say, we must investigate concerning that which subsists as entity after this manner as to what it is. Chapter 2. Now, substance seems to subsist, no doubt, in bodies most palpably. Wherefore, we say that both animals and plants, and the parts of them, are substances, and we say the same of natural or physical bodies, as fire, and water, and earth, and everything of this sort, and as many as are either parts of these, or are composed of these, either partly or entirely, as both the heaven and its parts, stars, and moon, and sun. Whether, however, these are the only substances, or whether there are others besides, or whether no one of these, but certain different ones, are substances, this must be examined into. But to some the boundaries of bodies, as superficies, and line, and point, and monad, seem to be substances, and that, too, rather than body and solidity. Further, with the exception of things that are sensible, some are not of opinion that there is anything in existence of the kind, but others that there are many such, and that especially those entities have a subsistence which are eternal, as Plato considered both forms and mathematical entities as two substances, and as a third the substance of sensible bodies. But Speusippus, starting from one, says that there are many substances and first principles of each substance, one of numbers, but another of magnitudes, then another of soul, and in this way extends therefore the classes of substance. And some affirm that forms and numbers have the same nature, but that other things that are connected therewith, as lines and surfaces, belong to a second class of substances, as far as to the substance of the heaven, and to sensibles. Accordingly, respecting these, we must consider what it is that is said well or not well, and what substances exist, and whether there are certain ones besides sensibles, or are not, and how these subsist. Also, whether there is any separable substance, and why there is, and after what mode of subsistence, or whether there is no substance besides sensibles. This, I say, must form the subject of our investigation, having first delineated substance in a sketch of what it is. Chapter 3. Now, substance is denominated, if not multifariously, yet at least in 4 ways particularly. For both the essence or the formal cause, and the universal and the genus, seem to be substance in each thing, and fourth of these is the subject. But the subject is that of which other things are predicated, while itself is no longer predicated of any other thing. Wherefore, concerning this point, we must come to a determination in the first instance. For substance appears especially to be the primary subject. Now, in some such manner is matter denominated substance, but in another way form, and in a third that which results from, or is a compound of these. Now, I mean by matter brass, for instance, but by form the figure of the idea, and by that which is composed of these the statue in its entirety. Wherefore, if form be prior to matter, and rather than it is entity or being, also for the same reason will be prior that which is a compound of both. Now, therefore, by way of a rough delineation has it been declared what substance is at all, namely, that it is not that which is predicated of the subject, but is that of which other things are predicated. It must needs, however, be spoken of not in this manner solely, for such is not sufficient, for this account of it is obscure. And further, matter becomes substance, for if matter is not substance, what else is, escapes our comprehension. For when other things are removed away, nothing appears remaining, for other things are the passive conditions of bodies, and are productions and potentialities. But length and breadth and depth are certain quantities, but not substances. For quantity is not substance, but rather that wherein these very qualities are inherent primarily, that is substance. But unquestionably, if we take away length and depth and breadth, we see nothing left except whatsoever is bounded by these. Wherefore, to persons conducting the inquiry in this way, matter must needs appear only as substance, and I call matter that which essentially is termed neither quiddity, nor quantity, nor anything else of those things whereby entity is defined. For there is something of which each of these is predicated from which, quote, the being, close quote, is different, as well as from each of the categories. For the other things are predicated of substance, but this of matter. Wherefore, that which is ultimate essentially is neither quiddity, nor quantity, nor quality, nor any other such thing. Neither, therefore, are negations so, for these also will have a subsistence according to accident. In consequence of these things, no doubt, therefore, it happens with speculators that matter is regarded as substance. This, however, is impossible, for both a capability of separation in its subsistence, and the subsisting as this particular thing, seem to inhere especially in substance. Wherefore, form, and that which is composed of both, would appear to be substance rather than matter. Indeed, then, as regards the substance which is composed of both, I mean composed of matter and form, the consideration of this must be omitted, for it is posterior and manifest. But somehow matter also is plain. But respecting the third substance must there be an inquiry made, for this is most perplexing. Now, certain substances of sensibles are acknowledged to exist. Wherefore, in the case of these, let us in the first place institute an examination. Chapter 4. But since in the beginning of this book we have made a division in how many ways we define substance, and of these a certain one seems to be the essence or the very nature of a thing, we must make an inquiry respecting this, for advantageous is the transition to what is more known. For in this way is instruction imparted to all by means of advancing through those things that are less known to nature to things that are more known, and this is something accomplished, as in practical things the having made from those things that are good to each, things that are good to each generally, so from things that are more known to oneself, the having made things that are known to himself, to be known to nature, as well as things that are known to individuals, and such as are first, and are often but little known, and often involve little or nothing of entity. Nevertheless, however, from things badly known, to be sure, yet known to oneself, must we endeavour to attain a knowledge of things generally known, making a transition, as has been stated, by the way of these very things. And, in the first place, let us speak thereof some things logically, because the very nature of everything is that which is denominated as subsisting essentially or absolutely. For your essence does not consist in being in one that is musical, for not according to yourself are you musical. Your essence then subsists according to yourself. For, truly, not everything that is essentially present to a thing is the very nature of that thing. For that is not the case with that which is so essentially present, as a white surface, since the being of a surface is not the same thing with the being of what is white. But, doubtless, neither is that which is composed of both, namely, the being of a white surface, the same as the essence of superficies. Should the question be asked, why it is not, our reply is, because superficies is contained in the definition of white surface. In whatever definition, then, expressive of this will not be found inherent. This will be the reason of the essence or very nature of each thing. Wherefore, if the being of a white surface is the being of a smooth surface, the being white and smooth is one and the same thing. But since also, in accordance with the rest of the categories, there are natures that are composite, for there is a certain subject to each as to quality and quantity, and the time when, and the place where, and motion, we must examine if there is a definition of the very nature or essence of each of them, and also whether the essence of a thing is inherent in these, as, for example, if in man the essence of white man is inherent. Now, let his name be garment. What, then, is the being of a garment? But, doubtless, neither does this belong to those things that are expressed absolutely, or shall we say that a thing which is not essential is predicated in two ways, and that of this the one is from addition, but the other is not so? And in regard of this being added to another thing, it is denominated as that which is defined. For instance, if one, defining the being white, should assume the definition of white man, another thing is so denominated, because something else is not added to it. For example, if a garment signifies a white man, but some one should define the garment as white, in this case a white man is, doubtless, something that is white. Yet his essence, or very nature, does not consist in being white, but in being a garment. Is there, then, in short, in existence, such a thing as the essence or very nature of entities, or not? For whatsoever is the very nature of a thing is the essence of that thing. But when one thing is predicated of another, it is not this certain particular thing, as, for instance, a white man is not this certain particular thing, if the being this particular thing belong to substances only. Wherefore, the very nature of a thing appertains to those things the discourse respecting which is a definition. But not every discursus which signifies the same thing as the name is a definition, for in this case all discourses would be definitions. For the name will be the same with any discourse whatsoever. Wherefore also the term Iliad will be a definition. But if it may be one of some primary thing, a discourse is then a definition, and things of this kind are such as are spoken of not in respect of the predication of one thing of another. The very nature of a thing will not, accordingly, be found in any of those things that are not the species of a genus, but in these only. For these seem to be predicated not according to participation and passion, nor as an accident. But no doubt there will be a discourse of each thing, and it will signify something of the other things, if it be a name. I mean that this particular thing is inherent in this, or instead of the simple assertion, is there one that is more accurate, but it will not be a definition, nor the essence or very nature of a thing. Or also, shall we say that definition as well as the essence of a thing is expressed in many ways? For also the inquiry what the nature of a thing is, in one way signifies substance, and the being this particular thing, but in another each of the categories, quantity, quality, and whatever things else there are of this sort. For as the inquiry what a thing is also belongs to all things, though not after a similar manner, but to one thing primarily, and to others in a consequent order, So also the nature of a thing inheres in the substance simply, but in other things in a sort of a way. For also, as to the quality of a thing, we could ask the question what it is. Wherefore, likewise, quality belongs to those things to which the inquiry what they are appertains, but not simply considered. But just as in the case of nonentity, certain speculators say that it is nonentity, logically speaking, not simply, but that it is nonentity, so also is it with respect to quality. It is necessary, therefore, to examine also how one should speak of everything, not, certainly, at any rate, more than how each thing subsists, or is disposed. Wherefore now, also, since what is spoken is manifest, the very nature or essence of a thing will also in like manner be inherent primarily and simply in substance, and afterwards in other things, as in the inquiry what a thing is, the essence or very nature of that thing will not be inherent simply, but with the addition of quality or quantity will the essence be inherent. For it is requisite to speak of the existence of these entities either equivocally or with addition and ablation, as also that which is not the object of scientific knowledge is a thing that may be scientifically known. Since this is correct at least, neither to speak of these equivocally, nor in like manner, but just in such a way as what is medicinal is predicated in reference to one and the same thing, without, however, being one and the same thing, and yet, indeed, is not equivocally predicated either. For no medicinal body is termed a work and an apparatus either equivocally or according to one, but in relation to one thing. Therefore, in whatsoever way one chooses indeed to express these things makes no difference. This, however, is evident, that definition primarily and absolutely considered, and that the essence or very nature of a thing belong to substances. Notwithstanding, they belong to other things also, in a similar manner, except not primarily. For there is no necessity, even though we should admit that a name has the same signification with a certain discourse, that a discourse about that which the name signifies should be a definition of this. But this will take place if the name may have the same signification with a discourse, at least a certain discourse. And this takes place if it be of one thing, not by continuity, as the Iliad, or whatever things else are one by connection, but if it is as multifariously expressed as one thing is. Unity, however, is predicated in as many ways as entity, and entity signifies partly this particular thing, and partly quantity, and partly quality. Wherefore also of white man will there be a certain discourse and definition, and in another way will there be the same, both of that which is white and of substance. Chapter 5. This statement, however, involves a doubt, in case any one denies definition to be a discourse subsisting from addition, of what the definition will be of those things that are not simple, but connected together. For from addition it is necessary to make them manifest. Now, I say, for instance, there is nose and hollowness, and flatness of nose. I mean, that which is called from both of these in respect of this being inherent in that, and neither the hollowness nor the flatness of nose is, according to accident at least, a passion of nose, but subsists essentially, nor do they subsist as the white in Callias, or man, because Callias is white, to whom it is an accident to be man, but they subsist as the male in animal, and the equal in quantity, and in the same way as all those things that are said to be essentially inherent. But these are those in whatsoever is inherent either the definition or the name of which this is an affection, and which it is not possible to manifest separately, as it is possible to make manifest the white without man. Not so, however, the female without animal. Wherefore the very nature and definition of these are either of nothing, or if there is a definition of these, it is in a manner otherwise from what we have declared. And there is also another matter of doubt about these. For if in truth a flat nose and a hollow nose are the same thing will be the flat and the hollow. But if not, on account of its being impossible to use the word flat even without the thing of which it is an essential affection, and if flatness of nose will be a hollowness in the nose, the speaking of flat nose either is a thing not possible, or the same thing will be said twice over, as thus nose is hollow nose, for the nose that is the flat nose will be a hollow nose. Wherefore the inherence in things of this sort of what is the essence or formal principle would be absurd, and if it were not absurd there would be a progression ad infinitum. For in a nose, a flat nose, will there further be inherent something else that is essential. It is evident, therefore, that of substance only is their definition. For if it were also of the rest of the categories, it must needs be from addition, as in the definition of quality and unevenness. For it is not framed without number, nor is the definition of female framed without animal. Now, definitions formed from addition I call those in whatever the same things happen to be said twice, as in these. And if this be true, neither will there be definition of those things that are conjoined together as of an odd number. It escapes their notice, however, that not accurately are the definitions of these things expressed by them. But if there are definitions of these things also, doubtless in a different way do they subsist. Or, as has been affirmed, definition must be spoken of as subsisting in many ways, and so with the essence, or the very nature of a thing, likewise. Wherefore, in one way, there will not be a definition of any of these, nor will essence be inherent in any one of these, save in substances, and in another way they will be inherent. That therefore, indeed, definition is a discursus or description of the very nature or essence of a thing, and that the essence or formal principle belongs either to substances only, or especially both primarily and simply, is manifest. End of chapter 5 of book 6. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 6 of book 6 of Metaphysics by Aristotle. Translated by John McMahon. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Geoffrey Edwards. Chapter 6. Let us now consider whether the essence or very nature of a thing and each individual thing are the same or different. For this will be of advantage in reference to the inquiry concerning substance. For both each particular thing does not seem to be different from its own substance, and the essence, or very nature of each thing, is said to be the substance of that thing. Therefore, in the case, no doubt, of things that are predicated according to accident, these would seem to be different, as that a white man is a thing different from the being of white man. For if they were the same, both the being of man and the being of white man would be the same. For man and white man, as they say, are the same thing. Wherefore also the being of a white man and the being of man would be the same. Or is there no necessity for whatever things that are according to accident to be the same as those things that have an essential subsistence? For not in like manner do the extremes become the same. But perhaps at least it would seem to happen that the extremes should become the same according to accident, as for instance the being of white and the being of a musician, but this does not seem to be the case. And as regards things that are predicated absolutely, there always is a necessity that they be the same, as must take place if there are certain substances belonging to which there are not different substances, nor different antecedent natures, such as some affirm ideas to be. For if the actual good be a different thing from the being good, and animal from the being animal, and entity from the essence of entity, there will exist both different substances, and natures, and ideas, besides those mentioned, and those substances will be prior if there be in existence the essence of substance. And if they are indeed unconnected one with another, of such there will not be a scientific knowledge, and they will not be entities. Now, I mean by the phrase unconnected, if neither in the actual good is inherent the being good, nor if the existence of good pertains to this. For the scientific knowledge of each thing subsists when we know the essence or very nature of each thing. And in the case of what is good, and of other things, the same takes place. Wherefore, if the being good be not good, neither will the being in entity constitute entity, nor that in unity be unity. In like manner also, all or not one of the essences will have an existence. Wherefore, if neither it be so with the being in entity, neither will it be so with anything else. Further, in whatever is not inherent, the being good is not good. Accordingly, it is necessary that the good and the being of good be one, also the fair and the being fair. In fact, whatsoever things are not predicated of another, but have an absolute subsistence, and are things which are primary. For also this is sufficient if it takes place, even though forms may have no existence, but rather perhaps if forms do subsist. But at the same time it is evident that also if ideas are such things as some say they are, the subject of them will not be substance. For it is necessary that these be substances, I admit, but it is not necessary that they be predicated of a subject, for in this will they be inherent by participation. And, doubtless, from these arguments it is evident that each particular itself, and the essence, not according to accident, are one and the same thing, and that to have a scientific knowledge at any rate of anything is to know scientifically the very nature or essence of that thing. Wherefore, according to this exposition, it is requisite that both be a certain one thing. But that a thing predicated according to accident, as the musical or white, should be the same as the very nature of a thing itself, on account of the twofold signification of that in which it is an accident, and the accident itself, this is not a true assertion, so that in a certain respect a thing itself is the same, and in a certain respect is not the same, with the very nature of that thing. For the being of man is not the same with that of a white man, but so far as the essence of man is passive to whiteness, it is the same. Now, it would appear absurd also if any would impose the name on each thing of the essences, for there will be another essence besides also that, as besides the essence of horse there will be a different essence of horse. Although what hinders certain essences even from being now directly the same as the things of which they are the very natures, if the very nature of a thing be substance? But truly, not only are they one, but also the definition of them is the same, as is also evident from the statements that have been made. For to be one and one are not according to accident. Further, if they be different, they will go on in a progression ad infinitum. For the one will be the essence of being one, but the other the one itself. Wherefore also, in the case of those, will there be the same definition. That, therefore, in the case of the first existences, and of things predicated essentially, the being of each thing, and that very thing itself, are one and the same thing, is evident. As regards, however, the refutations of the sophists in reference to this position, it is palpable that they are decided by the same solution. For example, these sophists inquire whether Socrates and the being Socrates are the same. For there is no difference in the things either from which one would ask the question, or from which he should light upon an answer in his attempted solution of it. how then the essence or very nature is the same, and how it is not the same with each particular thing, has been declared. Chapter 7. Now, of things that are being produced, some are produced by nature, and others by art, and others from chance. All things, however, that are produced by means of something, and from something, and become something. But I mean that they become something according to each category, for they are generated either as quiddity, or quantity, or quality, or the place where. But generations, the physical or natural ones, I mean, are those, unquestionably, of which the generation is from nature, and that from which they are generated is that which we denominate matter. But that by means of which they are generated belongs to some one of those things which have a subsistence by nature, and that which is some particular thing is man, or plant, or some one of the things of that sort which we affirm to be especially substances. Now, all things which are produced either by nature or art involve matter, for it is possible for each of them both to be and not to be. This capability, however, is the matter in each. And in general, nature is even that from which a thing proceeds, and that according to which entities are generated is nature likewise. For that which is being produced has a nature, as, for example, a plant or animal, and that by means of which a thing is generated is nature herself, which is predicated according to the species, and is of the same species. But this is inherent in another, for man begets man. In this way, therefore, are produced the things that are generated through nature, and the rest of the generations are denominated productions, or operations. All operations, however, are either from art, or from potentiality, or the understanding. But of these some are produced also from chance, and from fortune, in a similar way, as in the case of those things that are produced by nature. For there also are produced some things that are the same both from seed and without seed. Respecting indeed these, then, we will subsequently institute an examination. From art, however, are generated those things of whatsoever there is a form in the soul. But I mean by form the essence or very nature of each thing, and the first substance. For also of contraries in a certain manner is there the same form, for thus the substance of privation is the substance that is the one opposed, as health of disease. For by the absence of health is disease made apparent, and health constitutes the principle in the soul and in the science. The salubrious, however, is produced when the physician reasons thus. Since this is done for the sake of health, it is necessary, if this will be salubrious, that this particular condition should exist, for example, evenness, and if this take place, that the result be heat. And so he always reasons until he conducts you to that which he himself can accomplish last. Accordingly now, the motion which begins from these is called the operation that tends towards becoming healthy. Wherefore it happens that in a certain manner from health is generated health, and a house is constructed from a house, namely, that which involves matter arises, or is generated from that which does not involve a connection with matter. For the medicinal and the house-building arts are the form, the one of health and the other of a house. Now, I mean by substance not involving any connection with matter, the essence or very nature or formal cause of a thing. Of generations, however, and of motions, one is termed thought, and another operation. That is termed conception, or thought, which arises from the first principle and the form. But that is operation, which takes its rise from the thought or conception of what is ultimate. In like manner, also, is produced each of the rest of those things that are media. Now, I say, for instance, if health is to be restored, there must needs be a reduction to equality secured. What, then, is this reduction into a state of equality? It is this particular result. But this particular result will take place if heat shall have been promoted. And what is this? it is this particular effect. Now, this effect is inherent in capacity, but the former already lies in the power of the physician. Now, that which brings about the result, and whence the motion of restoring health derives its beginning, if it springs from art, such is the form that is in the soul. But if it arises from chance, it arises from that evidently which, for once, is the principle of bringing about the change to one that acts from art, as also perhaps, in the case of restoring health, the first principle originates from the communication of heat, and this result is accomplished by means of friction. Accordingly, heat is either a part of health, I mean, such heat as inheres in the body, or there follows it directly some such thing as is a part of health, or this is accomplished indirectly, that is, by means of many media. This last, however, is that which produces the result, and in this way is part of health, as stones are parts of a house, and something else a part of other things. Wherefore, as it is said, it is impossible that there be a production of anything, if nothing may pre-exist. That certainly, therefore, a portion will exist necessarily is evident, for matter is that part, for this is inherent, and is itself produced. But then, as such, is it to be classed amongst those things that are contained in the definition. And in both ways we denominate the brazen circles what they are, speaking of both the matter that it is brass, and the form that it is such a figure, and this is the genus into which it is first posited. But a brazen circle involves matter in its definition. But that from which, as from matter, some things are formed is styled, when it is so formed, not that from which they are formed, but is called something else that is of this, as, for example, a statue is called not a stone, but of stone, or stony, and a man who is in a state of convalescence is not denominated that from which he recovers back his health. And a cause of this is the following, that arises from privation, and the subject which we call matter, as both a man and a person that is indisposed become healthy. Rather, however, is health said to arise from privation, as one in health from one that is indisposed, than from man. Wherefore, a sick person is not denominated as one that is sound in health, but this is affirmed of man, and a man who is in sound health. And in regard of those things of which the privation is obscure and nameless, as in the case of the brass, whatever be the figure, or in the bricks and timbers of a house, those things seem to arise from these, as in the instance above adduced, one that is in health from a person that is indisposed. Wherefore, as neither that which is produced is called by the name of that from which it is formed, in the case of the instance above adduced, so neither in this instance is the statue called wood, but derivatively is classified as wooden, not wood, and as brazen, but not brass, and stony, but not stone, and a house also is spoken of as made of bricks, but not as bricks, since if one carefully examines, he would not say absolutely that either is the statue produced from wood, or a house from bricks, on account of its being necessary that whatever is produced from anything should be changed from that from which it is produced, but should not continue as it was before. Therefore, on account of this indeed, the thing is expressed in this manner. Chapter 8. Since, however, that which is produced both by something, now, I mean, that whence also originates the first principle of generation, that is, its efficient cause, and from something, but let this be not privation, but matter, for already has it been defined in what manner we have denominated this. Also must there be that which is produced, and this is either a sphere, or a circle, or whatever else of the other things that may chance to present itself, as neither the efficient cause produces the subject, I mean the brass, so neither does it make the sphere, unless by accident, because a brazen sphere is a sphere, but it does not produce the sphere itself. For the production of a certain thing of this kind is the production of this particular thing from the entire subject. Now, I say that to make the brass round is not to make the round or the sphere, but something different, such as this form in another thing. For if the artist produces it, he would produce this from something else. For this would be the subject, as, for example, to make a brazen sphere, and this the artist makes in this manner, because from this particular thing, which is brass, he forms this which is a sphere. If, therefore, also he produces this very thing, it is evident that in like manner he will produce another, and the productions will go on in a process ad infinitum. It is palpable, then, that neither form, or by whatever name we must needs term form, as it subsists in that which is cognizable to sense, is produced, nor is there a generation thereof, nor is this the essence or very nature of a thing. For this is that which is produced in another subject either from art, or from nature, or potentiality, and the efficient cause it is which produces the existence of a brazen sphere, for it produces it from brass, and a sphere, for into this particular thing, which is the form, doth the efficient cause mould the brass, and this constitutes a brazen sphere. And if, in short, of the being or existence of sphere there exists a generation, it will be a something that is a generation from a certain thing. For it will be necessary that what is produced always be divisible, and that this should be this particular thing, and that should be something else. Now, I mean that this should be matter, and that form. Therefore, if a sphere be a figure equal from the centre to all points of its periphery, of this one part will be that in which that which produces will be inherent, and the other part that which resides in this part, but the whole is that which has been produced or generated, as for instance the brazen sphere. It is evident, therefore, from the statements that have been made, that what is denominated as form, or as substance, is not generated, but that the union which is said to take place according to this is generated, and that in everything which is being produced matter is inherent, and that one part is matter, but the other form. Whether, then, is there any sphere besides these components, or is there a house besides the bricks, or shall we say that if this were the case, neither would this particular thing ever have been produced, save that it signifies a particular thing of this sort? This, however, also is not defined, but it produces and generates such a particular kind of thing from this particular thing, and when it has been generated, it is this particular thing with such a quality. And the whole of this particular thing is Callias or Socrates, just as this is a brazen sphere, and man and animal are, in general, as the brazen sphere. It is evident, therefore, that the cause of forms, as some have been accustomed to denominate forms, if there are certain natures of this sort in existence besides singulars, in no wise is useful towards both generations and substances, nor would essential substances have a subsistence on account of these at least. It is accordingly evident that in the case of some things also, the generator is such as that which is being produced or generated, not, I admit, the actual thing itself at least, not so numerically, but specifically, as may be observed to take place in natural phenomena. For man generates man, unless something abnormal or contrary to nature be produced, as when a horse begets a mule, and with these is it in like manner. For that which would be common to a horse and an ass, namely the most proximate genus, would not have a name imposed upon it, but both perhaps would be as a mule. Wherefore it is plain that it is in no wise necessary to provide a form as an exemplar or model, for in these, that is, in things sensible especially, investigators from time to time have searched for them. For these same, in an eminent degree, are substances. But for the generator it sufficeth to have produced, and to be the cause of the subsistence of form in matter. and the entire now of such a form in these things, such as flesh and bones, is Callias and Socrates, and different, no doubt, is a thing on account of the matter thereof. For matter in each thing is different, but in form it is the same, for the form is indivisible. Chapter 9. Some one, however, may doubt perhaps why some things are produced by both art and from chance, as health, but other things are not produced in this way, as a house. Now a cause of this is the following, that the matter of these, which is the first principle of generation, consists in the accomplishing and the production of something of those things that are artificially formed, in which there is inherent a certain portion of the thing, which matter is partly of such a kind as is capable of being moved by itself, and partly is not so. And of this one part is it possible to move in this particular way, but the other it is not possible. For many things involve the capacity of being moved by themselves, but not in this way, for instance to leap. As regards those things, therefore, of which the matter is of such a kind, as stones, it is impossible for them to be moved in this way, unless by something else, yet in this way assuredly, and it is so with fire. On account of this, some things will not be without that which is in possession of art, whereas other things will be, for they will be moved by those things which do not possess art, no doubt, but are themselves capable of being moved either by other things which do not possess art, or possess it partially. But it is evident from the statements that have been made, that also all things, in a certain manner, are generated from things that are equivocal, as those that have a subsistence from nature, or from an equivocal portion, for example, a house from a house, or by reason of intellect. For art is form, either from a part, or from that which possesses a certain part, if it be not produced according to accident. For the cause of the production is an essential first portion. For the heat which is involved in motion has generated heat in the body, and this is, unquestionably, health, or a part of health, or there follows it a certain part of health, or health itself. Wherefore also it is said to be a producer, because that produces health, on which heat follows, and to which it is an accident. Wherefore, as in the syllogisms, substance is the first principle of all things, for from the nature of a thing are syllogisms, so also in this instance are generations, and in like manner also with these are those things that are by nature constituted. For the seed produces as things that are constructed from art, for it involves form in capacity, and that from which the seed originates is, in a manner, equivocal, for it is not necessary to investigate all things in this way, as man is from man, for woman also is from man. Wherefore mule does not originate from mule, save unless there be an injury from mutilation. Thus as many things, however, as are being produced from chance, just as in that instance, are those the matter of which is capable also of being moved by itself with that motion which the seed effects. But those things the matter of which does not possess this capability, it is impossible can be produced in any other way except from themselves by generation. Not only, however, does this reasoning concerning substance manifest the non-production of form, but in like manner concerning all that are primary natures there is involved the same reasoning in common as of quantity, quality, and the rest of the categories. For as the brazen sphere is what is produced, but not the sphere or the brass, and as it is so in the case of brass, if it is what is produced, for always it is necessary that there pre-exist matter and form, so also must it be in the case of the what anything is, or quiddity, and in the case of quality and quantity, and similarly of the rest of the categories. For there quality is not produced, but such a sort of quality of wood, neither quantity, but such a measure or quantity of wood, or an animal of such a kind. But from these statements may we acquire what is a peculiarity of substance, namely, that there is a necessity that there should always pre exist a different substance, I mean, one subsisting in a state of actuality, which produces, as for instance, an animal must pre exist, if an animal is produced, but this is not necessarily the case with quality or quantity, unless in potentiality merely. End of chapter 9 of book 6. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.